On Tuesday, April 5th, 2005, my grandmother's life was on the line. It was springtime in New York City when my grandparents returned home from Israel. But upon stepping foot on the ground again, my grandmother's life was about to change forever. She could not walk more than a few steps before struggling to catch her breath. Presuming her fatigue was from a long day of travel, she didn't think anything of it. But as my grandparents exited the terminal, my grandmother's symptoms only worsened. At the same time, my uncle was waiting outside of the terminal to pick up my grandparents. When over an hour had passed, he knew something was wrong. When they finally made it outside, my grandmother's physical state told everything. At the doctor's office, my grandmother had no option but to wait. Upon evaluating the results, nothing showed any signs of concern. With one last test to check off the list, the doctor ordered an electrocardiogram. Known as an EKG in the medical world, it enables doctors to see a patient's pulse on paper. When the results arrived, the doctor realized the severity of the situation. My grandmother was showing signs of a heart attack. At the hospital, my grandmother had no option but to wait. When the cardiologist finally arrived, the doctor needed to assess my grandmother's heart. To do so, he performed an angiogram. During this procedure, patients receive a black dye in their bloodstream. Doctors then use special X-ray technology to assess blood flow throughout the body. Captured images allow doctors to detect any possible blockages throughout the arteries. In my grandmother's case, doctors uncovered nothing short of a miracle finding. My grandmother had 98% blockage in her LAD artery. She had to undergo emergency surgery immediately. During the operation, doctors employed a special device called an angioplasty stent. When placed in the obstructed artery, it expands like a balloon, allowing more room for blood flow. Well, it may have saved my grandmother's life then and there. It by no means made her bulletproof. Less than a year later, doctors uncovered a 75% blockage, this time in her right common carotid artery. After all the trauma my grandmother had been through, she was at a loss for words. She couldn't seem to understand what caused her heart disease to recur in such a short amount of time. After all, she received what many physicians consider to be life-saving treatment. Fast forward to 2021, my grandmother found herself in the emergency room. Before returning home, doctors ordered a series of tests to make sure she was healthy enough to do so. The results were beyond remarkable. My grandmother had not only stopped the progression of her heart disease, she had reversed it. This is my grandma at her grandson's high school graduation 19 years after she nearly lost her life to a heart attack. Thanks to a healthy diet, she's now 88 years young and continues to enjoy her 7 grandkids, including me. To understand how far we've come in the evolution of scientific research, we have to return to the summer of 1982. Yes, you heard me right, before over half of us were born yet, and when going viral just meant catching a cold. Renowned surgeon Dr. Dennis Burkett had set up a network of missionary medical tents throughout sub-Saharan Africa. A major turning point in the medical field, he was amazed when Ugandans exhibited very few diseases common in more developed countries. Later on, findings revealed that in the Ugandan population, heart disease, our nation's #1 killer, was virtually non-existent. So what were they doing that we weren't? Or rather, what were they not doing that we were? What may have been the key contributor to their health and longevity can largely be attributed to the food they were eating. With a diet centered around starchy fruits, vegetables, legumes, and grains, Ugandan households ate meat sparingly. When scientists assessed blood samples from the Ugandan population, cholesterol scores reflected that of a modern-day American following a plant-based dietary pattern. What happened next would completely change the trajectory of medicine for good. Or, at least you would think. On July 21st, 1990, Dr. Dean Ornish and colleagues published a landmark study in which they not only had stopped the progression of heart disease in patients, but for the first time ever, they had reversed it. And they had done so without any fancy drug or revolutionary operation. All it took was simple diet and lifestyle changes. As teens, we've been misled to believe that conditions like heart disease don't develop until we reach old age. But that doesn't seem to be the case. You see, when it comes to heart disease, we're not just dealing with the heart, but the cardiovascular system as a whole. Our arteries are the highway system by which oxygen and other vital nutrients are circulated from the heart to the rest of the body. Lining the arteries are these endothelial cells whose job is to keep an unobstructed path for blood flow. The issue is that with age and a poor diet, these cells weaken over time, resulting in heart disease. Back in the 60s, an examination of over 1,600 autopsies uncovered the presence of aortic fatty streaks, the first telltale sign of heart disease, in many children under age 3 and in all children over age 3. When scientists nearly doubled the sample size, they concluded that atherosclerosis, the buildup of plaque inside the arteries, was not only present in childhood, but grew in severity throughout the teenage and young adult stages of life. So the question is no longer one of prevention, it's about reversing the damage that's already been done. Can a healthy diet even do that? Well, when Dr. Esselstyn and colleagues went to test that, they were hoping at best to slow down the progression of the disease in patients. Yet the results surpassed all expectations. Not only had Dr. Esselstyn's team confirmed Dr. Ornish's findings, but in just 3 weeks, patients had opened up their arteries, restoring proper blood flow simply by following a plant-based diet. There's overwhelming evidence in some of the most prestigious medical journals in the world that we can change our destiny by adopting a healthy lifestyle. Yet, heart disease continues to claim the lives of nearly a quarter of all Americans. And it's not like this is anything new. In fact, for more than half a century, heart disease has consistently outperformed all other causes of American mortality. So it begs the question, why, if we've had access to this information for over 3 decades, have we not changed anything about how we approach disease? Why do we keep treating the symptoms instead of the underlying root cause? Why are we reacting to tragedy instead of proactively preventing disease in the first place? Why do we keep needlessly losing loved ones to a reversible condition? I mean, even my grandma was 1 beat away from becoming another statistic. While many factors may be outside one's reach, the one thing we can control is our habits. The Global Burden of Diseases study, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, found that the single greatest contributor to American death and mortality was the American diet. Even the American Cancer Society concluded that only 5 to 10% of all cancer can be attributed to genetic predisposition, meaning that over 90% of cancer prevention is within our control. So what type of food should we be eating to prevent the onset of cancer? Well, it just so happens to be the same and only diet that has ever been proven to reverse heart disease, a plant-centered one. The American Institute for Cancer Research now advises people to consume a diet centered around starchy fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, while avoiding the intake of ultra-processed foods, sugar-filled drinks, and animal products like processed and red meats. And they're not alone in these standards. Back in 2015, the World Health Organization not only classified red meat as a probable carcinogen, but identified processed meat as a class 1 carcinogen, the same classification assigned to smoking. Okay, but how do we isolate this to make sure that it's actually solving for something? Well, it's not just anecdotes, it's science. Women who adhere to a majority of these recommended guidelines experience a 51% decreased risk of breast cancer compared to women meeting only 0 to 2 recommendations. Which one offered the greatest protection, you might ask? It seemed to be the restriction of animal products. Even in cancer patients, adherence to the guidelines was not only associated with higher survival, but lower overall mortality. Okay, but wait a minute. How do we isolate plants to measure their cancer-protecting properties? Well, you isolate the one thing plants have that animal products don't, dietary fiber. When scientists put it to the test, they found that increasing the amount of dietary fiber in one's diet decreased the likelihood of all-cause mortality by 37% and breast cancer-specific mortality by 28%. And it wasn't like it was a massive increase overnight. Only 5 grams of additional dietary fiber per day was associated with a 14% drop in all-cause mortality and a 9% drop in breast cancer-specific mortality. So what can we start doing right now to take personal responsibility for our health? A good place to start is indoctrination. I mean education. Everything I've shared with you here today is simply a product of independent learning. Back in 2020, everyone's favorite year, my mom, who happens to be a healthcare professional, handed me a book called How Not to Diet. As funny as the title sounds, it completely transformed how I see the world today. It left me in absolute shock when the novel discussed the possibility that our generation just might be the first not to live as long as our parents. Written by Dr. Michael Greger, How Not to Diet is just shy of 5,000 citations. If you think that's impressive, his latest book, How Not to Age, contains a whopping 8,360 citations. And no, this isn't some online commercial show. In fact, everything he does goes to charity. Don't believe me? It's even listed on his public website, nutritionfacts.org. A nonprofit service by Dr. Greger, he posts new videos and articles daily on the latest in evidence-based nutrition. He argues that when making decisions as critical as life or death, we should always go straight to what the evidence illustrates is the best course of action. So whether it's something as simple as adding an apple a day, or making an effort to get outside instead of scrolling our devices, or even if it's to getting to bed on time and getting the proper rest our body needs, yes, I'm talking directly to all you AP students with this one, it's these small changes that make the biggest difference. We have the science to empower ourselves to make evidence-based health-conscious decisions. We have the tools necessary to rewrite our life's narrative, not just for ourselves, but for the ones we love the most. And it starts with putting the data back in science, one step at a time. Thank you.